Hey guys, welcome to another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about a John Carpenter film that came out in the 90s, and that is called In the Mouth of Madness. That's the cover right here. I actually got a new copy of this off Amazon because it is a little hard to track down in like stores and stuff like that. So found this one online. Um, I did see John Carpenter in concert in the summer of 2016, which was pretty interesting. And they had the theme song from this movie play over some clips from this movie at the concert. So ever since then, I kind of always was interested in seeing this one. Heard interesting things about it. So here I am today, finally going to give you what I think of this movie. Um, Here's a quick look at the back cover of some other shots from the movie. There's Sam Neill there and his like little insane asylum thing that you'll see in this movie. Um, and there's other shots here. Basically, all the shots of Sam Neill going insane, basically in this movie. But in this movie, guys, what it's ultimately about is it's Sam Neill's like an insurance investigator, and he takes on a lot of like unusual cases, and he takes on a case where there's this famous horror novelist in the area who's slowly becoming bigger than Stephen King. His books are outselling Stephen King's books. They're making billions of dollars at this rate. He's just selling them, nonstop off store shelves. He's selling them in different countries. It's a huge success with this author, and he suddenly goes missing, and people want to know where he is. They want to know when his next book's going to come out, since all these books are getting really popular, and they want to read his next story the second it comes out. There's people who book his, they pre-order his books months ahead of time just to be able to read his books and stuff. So obviously this guy going missing is a pretty big deal for a lot of people. And so Sam Neill's in charge of tracking down this guy by this publishing agent that this author works with his books. And the best way that Sam Neill approaches it, since he really doesn't know a lot about this author and he's really not big into horror stories, is he starts reading these authors' books himself. And while this is happening, he's starting to realize that people are starting to go crazy off reading these books. The guy who was once his agent basically gets killed. He goes crazy. He starts killing people with an axe and stuff. And it's not just him. It's all these other readers who are just absolutely going nuts over these books, and they're doing really crazy things in their own personal lives as a result of it too. And so what he manages to do is, like I said, he reads some of these books, and he learns where this guy grew up and where he kind of gets his inspiration for his stories and so forth. So he decides to go on a road trip with the assistant of the guy that basically made him in charge of this case. It was Charlton Heston, and she's kind of the assistant to Charlton Heston that goes on this road trip with Sam Neill. And at first, they really can't find this town. It's very hard to track down. They're basically just basing it off of what Sam Neill was able to put the pieces together with books, because certain things in certain books are inspired from certain things and so forth. So they have a hard time finding the town. When they eventually get there, it's a very, very much a ghost town. There's not a lot of people there, and when the people who are there are pretty much absolutely insane. Some of them are just killing themselves and doing really crazy things to the people who actually are living in the town. And they kind of don't really welcome visitors that well, which they learn very quickly. So throughout the course of the movie, they have to figure out who exactly is this author? Why is he making all these people go insane through these books? Why did he go missing? And is Sam Neill really going crazy himself, or is this the work of fiction kind of clouding his vision of what the line between reality and fiction is? And so all these questions get answered over the course of this movie, basically. So, overall, guys, I thought In the Mouth of Madness was an okay film. As you can tell by my synopsis, it's not really an easy film to explain, I guess. It's a very one thing I always loved about John Carpenter is not only does he have great ideas in this movie, I think he knows how to handle characters and knows how to really make you feel like you're in that situation with that character, making it all the more scarier, like in Halloween, for example. One thing I thought In the Mouth of Madness did is stylistically, it's very much in the spirit of a John Carpenter movie. Like, it's stylistically well made and so forth. But there's just certain things about the execution that really aren't that great. Even though the concept is very strong, it's very much worthy of a John Carpenter directorial effort for a script like this. Unfortunately, the execution overall wasn't as strong as I really wish it could have been. But like I said, I think the concept of this movie and the style in which this movie is made is ultimately what makes certain aspects of the movie work pretty well, while other aspects kind of fail as a result. So for my positives and negatives in The Mouth of Madness, like I said, there are some really clever, is this a reality, is this fiction kind of ideas where people start to cloud both things, where both things kind of slowly become together, where something really scary you read in one of these books slowly becomes your reality because it starts to bother you so much and so forth. So I like those ideas. I like how when Sam Neill is reading these books, he starts to view things differently. He starts to view things that he recently saw in his recent days and so forth that are kind of altered based on these things that he's reading in these books. He's starting to see messages. He's starting to see how things really are, or how things really are with these new perspective that he has from these books and so forth. So I like that idea of sometimes the things we read as fiction, sometimes it slowly become our reality. And John Carpenter's trying to emphasize, don't do that, because it'll definitely ruin your life. It'll cloud the way that you perceive things. So I like this idea of what is reality, what is fiction, what kind of things in fiction can we leave at the door, what are some things we can bring out into reality to help us learn and grow as people. So I like that idea. I like how John Carpenter really thought this through as far as how that works. It also has a very claustrophobic vibe as soon as these two characters reach this town, when Sam Neill and the assistant reach the town. I like how claustrophobic and how you don't really have a lot of space to yourself and a lot of opinion as to how this town is ran and so forth. So I like that claustrophobic feel when they reach that town in the movie. And I thought there was some pretty good makeup work in this movie. I thought the makeup that they used for like the creatures and this like zombie herd that goes after Sam Neill at one point in the movie, all that was very well done. Very much, like I said, in the spirit of a John Carpenter movie. Just great makeup work, great use of zombies, and just making sure that these people are really looking like they're going insane while reading these books and so forth. So great makeup work in this movie. And overall, you can definitely tell this, I think his name is Sutter Kane in the movie, this fictional author. I like how they kind of inspired him off Stephen King. There's a lot of Stephen King-isms about the character himself and about these books and how these books look and how they turn out as stories and so forth. So I liked how the look and the approach very much felt like a Stephen King kind of story, even though most of Stephen King's stories take place in the state of Maine. Even though a lot of these scenes don't take place in Maine, they definitely managed to maintain that Stephen King look without having to go to the state of Maine and so forth. And I do like how this film does have a sense of insanity. You really feel like Sam Neill, you really don't know what is real and what's fictional anymore. Whether it's something you read in the book that's really bothering you, and that's how you're kind of perceiving certain things and so forth. So I like how we really do feel like we're kind of going insane with Sam Neill over the course of this movie. And I also like overall how the film shows what horror stories can sometimes do to people. How sometimes not only will it creep them out or bother them or introduce them to something that might potentially scare them throughout the course of their life and so forth. I like how this story was very much about, these are some things we should leave at the door. Here's some things to learn from horror stories. And here's a nice line between, you can believe this to this point, but leave it at the door here, because if you leave it at the door there, that way you won't have a bad perception of this other thing. For my negatives of In the Mouth of Madness, I thought overall it was a pretty strange movie. It's definitely, like I said, when I was explaining the synopsis, it's not a very easy film to take in. There's just a lot of really surreal scenes in here that are just very, even by the time the film was over with, I really didn't quite know how to feel about some of them. So if you're looking for a film that's more straightforward and more stylistically well made that still makes sense, unfortunately, In the Mouth of Madness, it's strange enough where it's not exactly that kind of movie. I also thought the film eventually became a practical effects showcase, which, in today's world, that's fine, because in today's world, they didn't really use a lot of practical effects. But for me personally, I thought there was one point in the movie where it was just practical effect, practical effect, practical effect, practical effect, practical effect. It just got to the point where I felt like the production team was showing me what they could do as a production team rather than accurately give something to this movie that's going to help it out story-wise and plot-wise. It just got to the point where it's just like, here's a creature, here's this person doing this thing, here's this person going crazy, and here's this person being able to twist her head now because of believing in these stories and so forth. So after a while, it just became a showcase of practical effects, and it just kind of loses track of the plot after a while. Then that goes into my next point. This film unfortunately does lose track of its plot after a certain point in the movie. It just becomes either Sam Neill going crazy over seeing certain things in this town, or us as audiences just taking in these practical effects, and it's just kind of showcasing them rather than adding anything to the plot at that point. So unfortunately, the film does kind of lose track of its plot at some points, and it's a little annoying at times. And this really isn't John Carpenter's best. I think films like Halloween and Starman and The Thing, not only do they live up to their concept, I think they're better told stories. I think those stories have better characters that you can root for the entire runtime. Whenever there's suspense in those movies, I think the suspense is more effective in those movies. So unfortunately, In the Mouth of Madness is not John Carpenter's best film. And overall, I thought there were some pretty underdeveloped characters in this movie. Even going back to Halloween with John Carpenter, I cared about Laurie Strode. I understood her personality. I understood where she came from. I understood her actions with certain things. In this film, I really felt like the characters were pretty underdeveloped. I really didn't feel, we're just following Sam Neill because he's the lead character. We're just following this assistant who's on this road trip with him because she's kind of the one that was okay with going to this town with him and so forth. So there was just a lot of characters in this film that were just really underdeveloped. I really didn't feel like I had a reason to care about some of them. And that's too bad because there's a lot of John Carpenter films where I really care about the characters a lot. So overall, I'm going to give In the Mouth of Madness a 7.5 out of 10. It's okay. If you've seen all of other John Carpenter's films, you just are curious to see what else he's worked on. It's not awful. It's not a bad movie. It's just it's very troubled at times. It really feels like it has a hard time concentrating on a plot. It just gets very strange at times, and it just kind of gets stuck in that strangeness after a while. Really would have preferred a story that had more interesting characters to focus on. Would have preferred a story that focused on its plot a little bit more. And unfortunately, like I said, it really is not John Carpenter's best. I think he has made better films than this movie. But like I said, the vibe and the ideas are here. They're just not John Carpenter's best. So 7.5 out of 10. If you find it for a low price, it's not bad. Like I said, if you just want to see what John Carpenter has worked on besides his really huge movies, it's not that bad. So 7.5, it's okay.